Hey everybody, it's Christina from Creations with Christina. Welcome back to a new video. Today I am going to just be going over the basic supplies that you need for starting card making. I have never done a video like this before, and I just recently put a blog post up about the beginning of the year and how I kind of laid back on doing videos because there was so much other stuff going on, and I thought it would be fun just to go over kind of the things that I think I remember purchasing back in 2007 when I first started getting into card making. One of them was my baby Cricut, which I don't have that, but this video is focusing mostly on the basic supplies that you need if you're just starting out with card making. And I'm going to start with my very first thing, which is some kind of mat. This is a cutting mat. It's a plastic mat. I've had this for quite some time. You probably remember seeing this in videos. As a matter of fact, I've had other versions of this. One thing just to keep in mind with this, it is plastic, so if you do get into stamping and embossing with a heat tool, this will warp. So you do need to keep that in mind, but it's a great surface for being able to use these grids to make sure you're putting things straight onto your cards, for keeping your surface of your desk protected. I love this. I've had this for many years. I pull it out every once in a while depending on what I'm working on, but I recently purchased this one. Now this is definitely not something I would have purchased in 2007 because there was no such thing as this glass mat, or there might have been and I just didn't know about it. But this is my Tim Holtz Tonic glass mat, and I love this. It is glass. It's it got the grid on it. The grid is actually down underneath the glass, so it's not going to wear off. You don't have to worry about heat on this. You can heat right onto it. There's also a little mat over here with a underneath this mat, which I'm keeping this here because it kind of keeps the glare from my light above. It has this mat right here that you can use for watercoloring and putting palettes on, and then it also has another little mat that can go on top of that as well for additional watercoloring and stuff like that. So I would recommend, if you're just starting off, getting the plastic one, but if you feel like you're going to move on and advance into heat embossing, I can use my heat gun or my glue gun right on here. I don't have to worry about it warping. This is definitely the way to go. Again, this is also a fantastic mat to have, and this was the version or the style that I had when I first started creating cards. The other thing I want to go over is adhesives. There are so many different types of adhesives on the market. If you're a scrapbooker and you think you might want to get into scrapbooking, the only advice I can give you is to make sure that you're using acid-free tape and adhesive so you don't have to worry about it ruining your photos in the future. That's all I have to say about scrapbooking. But there are so many different types of adhesives for card making. I like tape runners. This tape runner is actually one, I don't even know if I can find a link to where you can purchase this online. I get mine at Hobby Lobby and Michael's and Joann's, and I love this tape runner. It's one that I've used for the past probably 2 years or so when one of the tape runners I was using was discontinued. The other thing is to probably try an ATG gun or a Scotch ATG gun. Again, that is something you find at Michael's and Joann's, but I prefer using just this little quick grab tape runner. My other favorite adhesive is some type of liquid adhesive. I like this Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. This is brand new to my collection. It dries clear, and it is got a fantastic adhesive or hold to it. So this is pretty much the one I use quite often. Between these two things and card making, those are the two things I grab for the most. Some other adhesives that you might want to pick up are glue dots. They usually come on a roll like this in a box. Sometimes I have seen them on little clear sheets, and they're just filled with little glue dots. This I lost the box for, and they do come in different sizes. This is, I think, the 1/2 inch size glue dot, and they're just this little tiny dot that you can take your paper you can stick your paper right onto here and stick it on there, or you can peel it off and stick it on. I found that, just using my paper to grab it is the best way to do it. Something that has a really strong hold, so once this goes down, you're not getting it back up. I use this a lot for if I was tying ribbon onto my cards, which I usually don't use a lot of ribbon anymore, but if you're doing something like baker's twine, I love to use a linen twine on my cards. So this is definitely something you might want to have to help hold your ribbon and twine in place. I also recommend a glue pen. I have so many different types of glue pens. This is a Zig 2-way glue pen. It goes down blue, but once it's dry and clear, it's a removable adhesive. This is great if you are into using your Cricut and little die cutting. I know a lot of die cutting companies are coming out with things where you can actually build little creatures or little animals with die cuts. So this is a great little pen to have on hand for working with those little adhesives or those little die cut pieces. The other thing I recommend is dimensional adhesive. Now, I pulled out this one because it happened to be on top of my drawer. This is a 2mm thick. It's a pretty thin dimensional. And then I also have this Scotch 3M foam tape. What I love about dimensional adhesive is it gives a whole new layer to your card. It makes things pop off your card. I would just be very careful and not get anything too thick. 3M tape, I do believe this comes in different thicknesses. You don't want anything too thick. I will leave a link to this below, the one I like to use. I have had this roll for probably a good 2 years and it was pretty big, and I still have all this left. I also, you can also buy them in packages. This one happens to be by Tonic, but I also know you can get one dimensional adhesive from Stampin' Up! As well. And that is a fantastic dimensional adhesive, and they're not super thick. So the other recommendation I have, if you were starting out, I would definitely recommend at least, a tape runner and a liquid glue, and maybe these are something that you build up to later. But these two things are things that I reach for often, as well as this. So actually, I'm gonna move this over here. I would definitely go with these three, and then maybe move on to these if you decide that you're going to be needing these. If you're working on other types of projects, I would definitely go with Scor-Tape. People are very much into shaker cards. Everybody likes to make shaker cards. Those are the cards that have little pockets that you would put sequins and beads and stuff inside, and you can shake it and you would see those things moving around. You need a very strong adhesive for that so that they don't fall apart and you don't end up with sequins and beads all over the place. I prefer Scor-Tape. I've been using Scor-Tape for a very long time. It is acid-free, so you can use it for scrapbooking, and it comes in a ton of different sizes. This one, I believe, is the 1/4 inch tape. There's a 1/2 inch. This is the 1/4 inch as well, so this is just a second roll of that. And I also have more in my drawer. I have one that fell apart in here. Ooh. This one fell apart. This is my I believe this is the 1/8 inch 1/8 inch tape. So, and I use this for, again, this is great for shaker cards, but I like to use this for very intricate things, and obviously I have to work a little bit on cleaning that one up. Let's put that someplace where things won't get stuck to it. And I think this is also another one of the 1/2 inch. So this is a 1/2 inch, and this one was almost gone, which is why I have the second of this. So I do recommend this. This is also great for card making, but also scrapbooking as well. This is the Scor-Tape. We're gonna set that aside. So that's my basic on adhesive. I have tried so many different types of cardstock when I started making cards. I have gone through textured cardstock, white cord cardstock, regular just cheap cardstock from, well, I shouldn't say cheap, but inexpensive cardstock from Michael's and local craft stores. And I have found that I prefer the heavier cardstock, Paper Tray Ink, Simon Says Stamp, Stampin' Up! All have beautiful colored cardstocks. So when I'm looking for colored cardstock, those are generally the three companies I go with. Paper Tray Ink being my first one that I really love, Simon Says Stamp, and Stampin' Up! Simon Says Stamp have some beautiful colors, and I would recommend Paper Tray Ink, Stampin' Up! And Simon Says Stamp all sell variety packs. Great way to get familiar with the colors, get a taste of what kind of quality cardstock you prefer. And I do keep mine stored in these job tickets. I do have a video here on my blog on how I did that if you wanted to check it out. I will link that up above in the card or down below if you want to see that. Then the other one is white cardstock. I have 3 different types of white cardstock. I have inexpensive Georgia Pacific cardstock that I've been using. That was probably one of the first cardstocks I've ever purchased. You can get that at Walmart for like $5, $6. I think there's 250 in a package or maybe even more. But I prefer Neenah cardstock. This is the Neenah 80-pound cardstock. This is what I use when I'm stamping and die cutting. And then I have the 110-pound Neenah cardstock. This is what I use for card bases. I strictly use this for card bases. What I've done is actually taken these and made myself a little stash of card bases and little stash of bases where I can stamp on. For my 80-pound cardstock, I like to just cut them into 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, which is just a piece of 8 1/2 by 11 cardstock cut in the middle and cut across. I use these a lot for just when I'm stamping images and using them for just kind of minor die cutting. I do use my 80-pound cardstock. For my 110-pound cardstock, I strictly use that for card bases. So what I did one day was I just bought a ream of the cardstock and I sat down with my paper trimmer and cut that ream, not the whole ream, half of the ream, down to card bases. I mostly make card bases that are 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2, so they are a top folding card. But you can make them so that they're a side folding card as well. And then you can also cut them so that they're a side folding card and they have this 5 1/2 by 4 1/4, but they open at the top. So I do 99% of my cards are like this. So I cut half of my 110-pound cardstock into strips. So this would have been my 8 1/2 by 11. I cut it down the middle. A lot of them I just kind of set aside like this. Some of them I went through and I created a score line and folded them in half. So I have a whole bunch of these card bases set aside for me to use in the future, and they're ready to go, so I don't have to do that every single time I sit down to make a card. There are some great tools out there for scoring. I know recently the Cricut, if you're a Cricut person, they came out with a scoring blade, which I have not tried yet, but I do have it, so I can't wait to try it out. But there are these scoring tools. This one's called a Scor-BUDDY. This is a great one for card making. I have had this one in my stash for, I can't even tell you how long. It comes with the scoring tool as well as a grid on here that shows you the inches and the dimensions going across the top and the side. And then there's also a larger one. I think this is the older version. I do believe there is a newer version of this. I just haven't purchased it because I don't find myself using my big one as much as I use this one. This one is actually kept in my desk right where I can grab it. So let me just kind of give you a quick demo. The big one is great if you're into making dimensionals, like doing 3D kind of things, making boxes and that kind of thing. It's a great tool to have, the larger one. But if you're just card making, definitely go with the Scor-BUDDY. So I'm just gonna grab one of these cardstocks. This is one of the half sheets of 8 1/2 by 11. And I'm just gonna stick this right in here. I'm gonna grab my little score tool that comes with it. I generally don't use this. I have a different one that I like to use, and I'll talk about that later. But this is the one that comes with the Scor-BUDDY. And because my paper is 4 1/4 by 11, I want to score this in half. So that would be the 5 1/2 mark. So I'm just going to on the 5 1/2 mark, and I'm just going to go ahead and run my scoring tool right down in the groove. So I'm actually using the groove right here and going right down. And when you fold, you want to fold, so this is the indent, and then we have the ridge in here. You want the fold so the ridge is on the inside. So I like to use my Scor-BUDDY as a guide, and I line everything and push it right up against the side, and then I'll use my tool and just create my scored edge. So I'll do this a couple of times. The reason why you like to score is because it doesn't crack your cardstock. If you just took this really thick cardstock and folded it, you would have cracks at the top. So this prevents the cracks, and then you have the little ridge on the inside. so it makes the fold really, really nice. And what I would do is I would sit here and do a whole bunch of these all at one time and keep them on hand for when I'm ready to make cards. So that is your score tool. Again, Scor-Buddy is my favorite. There is a larger version if you got into making 3D things like boxes and so on. You definitely want to think about investing into the larger one, but this one is definitely fantastic for card making. So more tools that you definitely want to have in your supplies for card making are things like scissors. I've got these giant pair of Tim Holtz scissors that are Teflon, and they are fantastic. I've had these big ones and I've been using them quite often. I thought they would definitely weigh too big, but I use these all the time. But maybe you want to look into a very small pair. These are great if you're going to do what we call in the crafting, paper crafting, fussy cutting. This is a nice little pair, and then you can also pick up a bigger version, like one that's in between these two, which I don't have that one. I mainly use this small one and these very large ones, but I do have another size. The point on this one is much thinner than the point on these. These are some paper, Stampin' Up! Scissors that I've had for quite some time. Really look into a small pair and a large pair of scissors, and if you really want to, get the medium pair. I have not found, my medium ones got lost somewhere in my move into my new craft room, and I haven't been able to find them, but it's been over a year, maybe even more than that, and I haven't found a need to go and buy the medium size just yet. So I would definitely recommend the large pair and the smaller pair. Another great tool to have in your supplies is a tweezer. Now I have things attached to my tweezer. These are not necessary. These are other Tim Holtz products. This one is a rotary for cutting adding a perforated edge on your card, and this one is a distressor. So these things are not necessary, but I would definitely recommend a tweezers. There's so many different types of tweezers. I've had this one for quite some time. I believe this is by EK Success. They're actually kind of dirty. Probably shouldn't even be showing these. They have a great little thin tip on them, and it's great for those little die cut pieces. So when you're building images and you're taking a whole bunch of die cuts and putting them on top of each other, this is a great little tool to have so that you can hold your pieces while you're adding your glue and putting them in place. I've been using tweezers since I've had my Cricut in 2007 when I first purchased it, and definitely want to have these in your definitely want to have this in your stash of supplies. I really think this is definitely a very important tool. Another tool that is great to have is a paper piercer. You can use this for taking die cuts and poking them out of your dies, but it's also great if you want to add some dimension to your card by just poking some holes in it. So let me just grab a piece of cardstock. I'm using a foam base. Now I haven't done this method in such a long time, but this is great for if you wanted to add a little something extra to your card without having to buy anything special. You can actually create a little row, wow, this is really poorly done, of what looks like stitched, and I don't know if my camera's gonna pick it up. It's probably not gonna pick it up. The lighting is terrible. If it doesn't, I'm gonna put a quick snapshot of a photo in here, but this is great for just adding that little dimension and detail to your card, and I haven't done that in a long time. So that is a fun thing to do. But this little tool comes in handy not only for that, but for when you're working with those intricate dies and you need to poke those little pieces of cardstock out of those dies. So another thing to have in your collection when you're first starting off with card making is a paper trimmer. Now I have 3 different paper trimmers. I'm not going to show you all of them. I have this one by Tim Holtz. It's the Tonic paper trimmer. For some reason it's not sitting right on my desk here, but this is a great one. You can cut 8.5 by 11 cardstock on this, and its only downside is I cannot cut, if I showed you before I like my top folding cards, I can't cut my cardstock to be the 4.25 by 11 so that I could do the top folding card. You could only do it half, which is 5.5 by 8.5, so you can create that center fold and create the card base like this. That's the only downside to this trimmer. However, I have all of my paper stash trimmed and ready to go that I find myself grabbing for this one the most often, but I do need to have this to actually create that style card. This is a great paper trimmer. It has a little wire guide in the middle, which I don't know if you're going to be able to pick this up on camera. It does have a little latch over here. I do keep mine locked because I keep mine standing up in my cabinet. So I do keep this little latch over here locked, although not necessary. There's a little wire inside here, and what's awesome about that wire is you can see right where it's cutting. So wherever that wire is where you're going to cut. So this paper trimmer has a little wire right inside here, and wherever that wire is, that's where you're cutting. That I really do love that feature. I do buy the titanium blades, this is the blade right here. The titanium blade lasts longer than the ones that actually come with the original. So I would recommend getting this trimmer if you are just starting off with card making and getting into making cards, because it is bigger format. You can do 8.5 by 11. You can even do 12 by 12 cardstock or pattern paper with this trimmer. So I definitely would recommend getting this. This Tim Holtz one is a great one to have as a quick reach. Just got to be careful. There is a blade right underneath here. It is protected. It's a guillotine style. I really like this, but if you needed to buy one, I would definitely buy something that allows you to do 8.5 by 11 cardstock, whether it be in the portrait or landscape way of setting up your paper. So you can put 12 by 12 cardstock and pattern paper in here and not have to worry about it. So that's my recommendation on trimmers. You can get larger trimmers. I do have a much bigger trimmer that does more layers of cardstock, which is what I used when I was cutting all of my paper at one time. You can take your paper and have it cut by a stationery store. They will do that for you. They probably charge for it. I find I just like to cut my own, and then I don't have to worry about paying somebody to do it. Plus I have these tools on hand, so I might as well do it. So another tool to have in your collection is a bone folder. This one is a Teflon bone folder. There are so many different versions of bone folders. This one is one that I just bought at my local craft store. This one is the Teflon bone folder, which I just got. I held off on buying this for the longest time because it is a little expensive versus just using the regular one or the one that comes in my Scor-BUDDY. But what I like about this is the Teflon bone folders allow you to create your cardstock. I'm not scoring, and I'm using a thinner cardstock. It lets you actually use this flat edge right here. You can use this to create your score, but what it doesn't do, which I do see on colored cardstock, this one does, is it leaves a shine behind. This one does not leave a shine, and it does a perfectly nice fold. This one does as well, but like I said, it does that shine. I held off on buying this one for the longest time. However, I would recommend that if you're just starting off with card making, definitely invest in a little bit more of an expensive bone folder, being the Teflon one, because it doesn't leave that shine behind. It holds up pretty well. It's nice and sturdy, and I love this flat edge right here. It does have this edge right here, which I have used this in my Scor-BUDDY, but this flat edge down here is great for when you're creating your edges on your cards. I'm getting down to my last couple of tools here. I would definitely recommend white gel pens. I use these for creating accents on my cards. You can if you're using a die cutter like the Cricut, you can actually use these to create a little bit of dimension and look to your card that wouldn't be there if you didn't have this pen. I have two different pens. I have the Uniball Signo Broad pen. This has got a little bit of a bigger tip to it, and then I also have the Jelly Roll. This is by Sakura, I think is how you say it. I've had this pen for the longest time. This is what I use all of the time. This is my main one. It's got a thinner tip, and it's definitely the pen I use most often. I found this one keeps a flow much better than these white gel pens by Uniball, but I do like the broader tip on this, so every once in a while I will pull this one out. I also will give you a little inside tip. I even use this for bullet journaling. If I made a mistake, I use it as my whiteout. But definitely look for a white gel pen. Again, great for adding that little bit of accents onto cut images. You can also create a faux stitch line on darker colored cardstock. It's a great little tool to have in your collection of card making supplies, because you can add dimension and you can add just a little bit of interest to something that might be kind of dull looking. So I'd also recommend having a corner rounder in your supply. This is by We Are Memory Keepers. It's called the Crocodile Corner Chomper, and I have had this for quite some time. I do not know if this color version is still available, but I would recommend definitely getting a quarter rounder. I love the 1/4 inch. This one does a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch, and We Are Memory Keepers has so many different versions of corner chompers that you want to look into these, but this is the one that I keep in my desk right next to where I'm working. And let me just quickly show you how it works. So this is the 1/2 inch side. This is going to give you a 1/2 inch corner. This little device opens up like this, and then what you do is you take the corner of your paper, stick it right in there, and then you chomp, and that creates this little corner right here. Again, I'm going to do this on the 1/4 inch side so you can see the difference. So there's our two sides. So this is our 1/2 inch and our 1/4 inch. The 1/4 inch is the kind I like the best. But again, something that I think should be in a beginner's tool, maybe in the future of beginners. I wouldn't buy it like right away, but it's a great little again, detail that you can add to your cards. Very last thing that I have that I would recommend are rulers. I have probably 4 rulers in my desk, but I would recommend these. Clear rulers especially. This is a Tim Holtz ruler. It's the Ideology collection. I've had this, again, probably for many years, and I've had probably since the beginning. It's probably one of the first things I bought. But one thing that's really cool with this is if you bought the little paper piercer, there are holes in here, and you can use this as a guide to create, like I was showing you, all of those little details onto your card by poking little holes into your card base. So this ruler has that. I recommend getting this one. Mine is filthy. It has seen many craft projects. The other one I would recommend is the T ruler. This is a great ruler for especially if you're just starting off and you're really hard at, like, I'm terrible at putting things straight. I rely on my mat the most for when I'm laying stuff onto my bases, because I have a tendency to kind of, oops, I twisted it. So I like to look at those lines that are here, but you can also use this to create a little edge. This T ruler bumps right up against here, and say you wanted to add your cardstock, you can put it right on there and right up in the top, and you're going to get a straight edge. Now I did not cut, this was cut with scissors, so it's not going to be perfectly straight, but if I do it with this, nope, still not straight. I use regular scissors on this one. So, but if you took a flat, where it's all flat, you can actually use this to make sure that you're always straight. You can use this with a pencil just by drawing a line. Anything that you put this little T ruler right up against the top, it catches right on the edge of your paper, and it will help you make that straight line. You can use it for putting on your mats, for drawing straight lines, whatever. It's definitely something, I don't use it a ton because I rely on my mat for that, but I definitely use it if I'm working on stamping and wanting to create my sentiment so it goes straight. However, we have awesome new tools for doing that. But this would definitely be something that you would want to get if you're new to stamping and you don't want to invest in some of those awesome new tools that I'll show you in a future video. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. These are just the basics that you would want to have in hand, whether you're using it for an electronic die cutter or if you're into stamping. These are the things I recommend that you have if you're just starting off with card making. I will leave a link to all of the supplies that I showed you today down below in the YouTube description and over on my blog if you would like to check them out. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will catch you all in the next video. Bye!